How you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, live today, June the 10th, to start off the week with another round of great stories to get to around the NFL today, starting off with the news that broke today on the Steelers extending their head coach, Mike Tomlin, for another 3 years. We're going to get into the details of that. Also, Brandon Ayuk, some more developments in his contract. What is the recent development and the recent feelings around that from Brandon Ayuk coming directly from his trainer, plus the refereeing issue that we're seeing sort of become a trend recently in the NFL, the poor officiating leading to poor results and really affecting games. There does seem to be a reason behind that, so stick around to find out what that is. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as also as a reminder to use the tip and donations link that you see on your screen, gsmcpodcast.net. By using this link, it allows me to see your question or comment pop up in the chat box, and that way I could read it on air and get your guys' perspective on anything I say or on any of the topics on hand on today's show. It's a big help for this show and also the network, so please, if you would, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. And in saying that, we can get straight into the biggest news recently, just dropping today. The Steelers extending Mike Tomlin through the 2027 season. The Steelers and Mike Tomlin agreed to this 3-year extension and keeps him for another 3 years till 2027. Mike Tomlin was actually hired back in 2007, so if this deal goes the entire duration of this contract, he would be with the Steelers for about 20 to 21 years, which is pretty remarkable because that's as long as I've been alive, almost 22 years, and it is insane to think about it now with how this is all working out with the Steelers and Mike Tomlin. With this deal, Mike Tomlin was already the longest tenured coach in the NFL after Bill Belichick moved on, and once Bill Belichick moved on, there was some doubts, you could say, around the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin maybe getting this done. There was that moment back in January when the Steelers evidently lost to the Buffalo Bills, and after that, in the press conference, Mike Tomlin didn't seem too pleased to be there after a loss like that, and also just getting bombarded with questions about his future, about whether he was going to renew or if this was it for him. And of course, there was that viral moment with him walking off the stage after another reporter asked him what his future holds. Not the nicest of faces either on his expression, and he just walked off, even creating more doubts after that. But once that was all settled, he sort of confirmed that he was going to at least play out this year, definitely, if there was any doubts in February or in March. But then now this confirms it that he will be staying a lot longer than a lot of people anticipated, and also he just turned 52 in March, so it isn't like he is needing to retire or is getting too old for the position. He's pretty much relatively young for the spot as well, and after the serious doubts with all of his future going on, it seemed like the players really wanted him back, and you hear it all the time around the NFL and in anybody that talks about Mike Tomlin. That is the biggest point they make. He's a player's coach. Everybody wants to play with him. Somebody is able to really relate with him and how he just connects on a personal level, and that's really the biggest thing for me to keep Mike Tomlin around as a Steelers fan. Previously won the Super Bowl back in 2009, so there has been a very extensive drought since he was hired. 2 years in, he won the Super Bowl, and then since then, obviously has struggled to win some playoff games. He is 173-102 as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach, and has never had a losing season. That is the biggest attribute you can attach to Mike Tomlin's name. 17 straight years without a losing record. That is an NFL record also, and counting. And because of how much success he has had, not just in the NFL in general, but for the Steelers being one of the most successful coaches, he is only 21 wins away from surpassing Chuck Noll's 193 victory mark for the franchise record. So definitely could attain that. I expect him to, and beat that record in the next 3 years. But also, more on his resume, he has won the AFC North title 7 times, has made the playoffs in 11 out of his 17 seasons, and won Super Bowl in 2 appearances so far. A statement from Pittsburgh Steelers president Art Rooney said to sort of explained the reasoning behind the contract extension to Mike Tomlin. He said, Mike Tomlin's leadership and commitment to the Steelers have been pivotal to our success for his first 17 years as the head coach. Extending his contract for 3 more years reflects our confidence in his ability to guide the team back to winning playoff games and championships while continuing our tradition of success. Very much receiving the backing of the president and pretty much the general manager, Omar Khan, as well. They've been together for the shortest amount of time, with Omar Khan just recently getting the job a few years ago. But Mike Tomlin stays in Pittsburgh. So what is the overall reaction from me, and I think from most around the NFL, is pretty positive and a surprise, but also not really, just because for anybody, any Steelers fans or anybody around the NFL that thought that Mike Tomlin, it was probably better that the Steelers moved on from him. Questionable take, just from my point of view, because I don't see how you could get much better than Mike Tomlin over the last few years. Never had a losing season. I get that point has been run into the ground over and over again, almost as a cop-out as to the mediocrity you see recently with the Steelers, and winning playoff games is what matters, and keeping the same guy around who, maybe isn't getting you over the hump is a valid point. But at the same time, in this league, in the NFL, when you have a team like this with older veterans, TJ Watt's getting up there in 29, 28, Cam Hayward's 30-something, Minkah Fitzpatrick's in the prime of his career, and also just a lot of veterans, also Russell Wilson, another veteran that won't be around for too much longer in the Steelers uniform, not to mention. But when you have all the pieces in place right now to win right now, which seems to be the case for the Steelers in the last few years, you can't just make a radical change like this, in my opinion, because if you were to move on from Mike Tomlin, where does that leave everybody in the Steelers organization? Cam Hayward's on a contract year coming up in 2024, so if you get Mike Tomlin, you might as well probably get rid of Cam Hayward as well. Then you have other situations, how do the players react to it, really having that personal connection to Mike Tomlin. I think TJ Watt has said before in the past that he does not want to play for anybody else but Mike Tomlin, so that does have to play a major part in all of this. If one of your best players isn't happy about it, you could obviously assume that will trickle down to the rest of the organization. And just in terms of results and production, again, you can't take it for granted. That's my biggest point around this, why I am pretty content with it as a Steelers fan, just watching this, seeing the criticism come in, and also having my own towards Mike Tomlin as well. But again, you can't just depend and assume something better could be right at your doorstep as soon as Mike Tomlin gets away. If they let go of Mike Tomlin and he finished off his contract this year, I could assure that probably in the few 3 to 4 months into free agency or into next season, he 100% would have had another job. The revolving door that is the coaching carousel in the NFL is really a legitimate thing. Coaches come in and out. Inexperienced coaches come in and they come out the same way for a lot of organizations, especially for some like the Dallas Cowboys, the Chicago Bears, the New York Jets as well. Mike Tomlin could have fit in any of those situations, and I would have assured that he get a job right away as soon as he became available. So it seems like right now there is a lot of pressure on the Steelers, obviously, to win. They have to get over the hump with the team that they have right now. Definitely one of their better ones, but the Steelers fans, the residents in Pittsburgh, definitely want to see this team get to the level they believe that they can with the players that they have, with the defense that they have, TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick. Then on offense, it's looking a little bit better now with bringing in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. The offensive line's a little bit better, so there is a lot of pressure this year. I do admit that, but how do you get the most out of this team now? Well, in my opinion, I just think you have the ability, you have the experience for sure, and you have, it seems, all the pieces that you would need, or they're right on the brink of really making that breakthrough. I think, to me, it just seems like Mike Tomlin, the Steelers team, they're really based on tradition and doing things their way, and sometimes that could bite you in the rear end if you just really depend on that too much. And now with this being a whole new chapter, I guess, with this new 3 years, they have this 3-year window to really take advantage of. That is where I would hope to see them take a little bit more risks in their decision making, in their game plan, in their execution during the game, in critical moments, really not being afraid of doing something that goes against tradition or goes against their philosophy. I think that's a way to sort of get the best out of this team. You're trying new things out, new quarterback and everything. It seems very new. You're bringing somebody finally from the outside to take over the offensive coordinator role. You are trending in the right direction, but now you have to build on it and continue to now make that your sort of reputation around the league and not be so dependent on the Steeler way and doing things how it always has been done, with the NFL continuing to change year in and year out. But a positive thing for the Steelers, they get this deal done. Not many coaches in the NFL, or not many teams I should say, would say that they have a better coach than Mike Tomlin. Maybe only 2 to 3. I would probably say at max think that they have a better coach than Mike Tomlin. He is highly regarded around NFL circles, so for the Steelers to keep him, I think was a no-brainer. They are happy about it, it seems. Mike Tomlin's happy about it. Now they just have to go out there and execute on the football field with this young and exciting team that they have. I'm very much looking forward to seeing them out there in 2024. But for the meantime, we will take a break in the show, the first break of today's episode, and when we come back, we're going to dive more into the Brandon Ayuk contract situation, updating you guys on the feelings now coming from Brandon Ayuk and his camp about the potential of signing a new deal with the 49ers, what has been said and what can we expect. All of that is coming up right after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to dive into our second segment of the show, a popular one starting to develop here on the episode. The Brandon Ayuk contract situation going on with the 49ers has been going on throughout the entire offseason. There has been some bad feelings about it, some positive ones coming from John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, but now I think we're sort of starting to really turn the page, turn the corner, however you want to say it, and start to come to a realization that this might not be as close as people would have thought, at least as close as 49ers fans would have thought, because we have constantly seen the trade rumors, any trade talk up to this point be declined by the 49ers and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. But also with the recent extension to Christian McCaffrey, it did add additional funds to the salary cap, about $7 million more in salary cap there created, and also about $18 million also from the post-June 1st release of Eric Armstead. So they had about $25 million in salary cap now to work with. Definitely more encouraging to try and get that extension done with Ayuk, but at the same time now, you have Brandon Ayuk's personal trainer, wide receiver trainer, TJ Housemanzadeh, say that Ayuk is feeling more pessimistic about a deal getting done. And he said it recently, appearing on the 95.7 The Games radio show with Willard and Dibbs, basically saying that at one point Brandon Ayuk thought he may sign. That optimistic outlook has turned into a pessimistic outlook, according to Housemanzadeh, the wide receiver trainer, saying that a few days ago on that radio show. And that really seems to be the first time that there has been revealed about any sort of negative feelings coming from, because before it was very cryptic. You know, Brandon Ayuk would say something on his social media, there would be something else coming from a relative of his, but nothing too concrete up until this point. And now I think this is a bit more legitimate of a reason to think that this is not really going to get done at the end of the day, because of you have the trainer saying it, and before you have people close to him who are related to him. The trainer doesn't have to come out and say this. The trainer isn't as close as obviously a family member would, who would want to see Brandon Ayuk get a massive deal and get, paid for all that he does. But a trainer, I feel like that's a little bit distant enough to not, have any other incentive other than really telling the truth and how Brandon Ayuk really feels. I'm sure they've talked about it. I'm sure Brandon Ayuk has had this trainer for a while now and could feel some level of personal connection to him to reveal some of his actual feelings around this deal. And also the trade rumors have always been there for Ayuk and how the 49ers sort of deal with this situation with such a massive asset to their team, but also in the trade market. That also seemed to be a legitimate reason as to why, this deal hasn't gotten done yet. Maybe they could trade him now instead of losing him for basically nothing next year in free agency. And really, these trade rumors really heightened and reached their peak during the NFL draft, when there seemed to be some interest from the Broncos, the Steelers mostly, but nothing really came about after that. And then you had the 49ers draft Ricky Pearsall out of Florida, and not only did that boost any other thoughts about them moving on from Brandon Ayuk, there was also those trade rumors around Deebo Samuel just coming out of nowhere, but those have seemed to pretty much die out in recent weeks. And now the recent action of the 49ers really pushed me to believe that this isn't going to get done, because I've always said it. I've always felt that if you really value an asset, if you really value extending and keeping a player over the long period of time and wanting him to be on your team, you would get that deal done and prioritize it ahead of other things that you might have in line. You look at the Vikings and Justin Jefferson not messing around, trying to get this deal done from last offseason. They obviously couldn't figure anything out, but they had the time to spend there and say, all right, we're not going to get it done this offseason. Let's wait until next offseason to talk it out even more. We get to this offseason and they finally figure something out. You also look at teams like the Houston Texans getting everything done and out of the way ahead of time, paying probably cheaper than they probably would have if they extended and waited to extend Nico Collins a little bit later. You look at the Philadelphia Eagles, again, extending Devontae Smith right at the beginning of the really wave of wide receivers getting their contract extensions. They probably get a bargain for Devontae Smith, and also extending A.J. Brown. Say they waited until after Justin Jefferson got his deal, they would not have had that extra time with A.J. Brown as they do now for an additional 3 to 4 years. So those are teams that sort of got their deals done and priorities out of the way because they really truly wanted to get it done. Now you look at the 49ers and it's a little bit different. You do acknowledge the fact that Christian McCaffrey's also there. He wasn't really satisfied with his contract, so okay, I can kind of understand that. McCaffrey obviously is who he is. A very great running back, probably the best running back in the NFL, and also does a lot of things in the passing game. So you can get a pass for him, but now they finally do it, and they waited a long time to get Christian McCaffrey that reworked contract, that contract extension now in June, basically, where they had all that additional time with Brandon Ayuk. Again, if they wanted to get it done, they could have done it months ago, where they could very well have done it then and then probably have paid close to what Jalen Waddle got, $27 million. Well, probably not 27, probably $28 or $29 million. And now they have to wait, and it is rumored that Brandon Ayuk would want something close to Amon-Ra St. Brown's deal. Again, that's what happens when you wait for these other receivers to get their deals handed to them by their own teams. And Brandon Ayuk's agent continued on to discuss those rumors and the idea that $30 million per year is appropriate for a wide receiver the caliber of Brandon Ayuk, by saying, if the 49ers want to get BA signed, give him the Amon-Ra deal. I guarantee he'd be in there tomorrow. They don't want to do that. If they offered him the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal, he would be in camp right now. And of course, Brandon Ayuk is still or wasn't present for the 49ers mandatory minicamp that concluded last week. Also interesting around that just point there, Nick Bosa wasn't present for the mandatory minicamp last offseason, but they sort of rescinded the fines that are supposed to go down on the players because they missed, obviously, the mandatory part of the offseason. But last year, they rescinded those fines for Nick Bosa, and now this year, reports from the 49ers have indicated that that won't be the case with Brandon Ayuk. Again, pushing you to believe that if they rescinded Nick Bosa's fines, similar situation, trying to get a massive deal, and they didn't rescind Brandon Ayuk's fines, again, makes you think they got Nick Bosa's deal done. They saved them the extra cash in paying those fines. They're not going to do the same for Brandon Ayuk, probably leading you to believe that he won't stay with the team much longer if they're not willing to do him a solid there and not actually make him pay the fines for missing this part of the offseason. And now, again, coming from his agent, still a person of confidence, similar to a relative but not really that close, makes me believe that this is a legitimate possibility now for the 49ers. And also, Brandon Ayuk, you want to compare him to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I sort of did this back a couple episodes ago when talking about the report that he would want around $30 million. If you look at the stats again, Brandon Ayuk had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons the last 2 years out of his 4 years in the NFL, and Amon-Ra St. Brown has also had 2 1,000-yard seasons and 1 900-yard season, where shorter time in the NFL and more efficient level of production than Brandon Ayuk, obviously, because Brandon Ayuk in his first 2 years, I want to say, put up close to 600, 700 yards probably in production, about 5 touchdowns max in each of the seasons, where Amon-Ra St. Brown has right away stepped into the league, almost produced a 1,000-yard season in his first year, and then it's been 1,000 and 1,000 to follow that up. But that is very much in favor of Amon-Ra St. Brown, but also you want to look at the opposite side and say that Brandon Ayuk has had to compete with Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and now obviously Christian McCaffrey, who would need his fair share of carries and attention on that offensive side of the ball. And Amon-Ra St. Brown really doesn't have to deal with that. He is the main guy there in a room, in an offense really filled with Sam Laporta, a rookie in Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Jameson Williams, really other players that I don't think it would be too radical or too crazy to say that aren't really at the same level talent-wise as Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that is another factor to consider, and the 49ers clearly have their doubts about this, about the value of extending Brandon Ayuk up to this point. I want to say another rumor I saw in my time of researching this was that right now I think the 49ers offer to Brandon Ayuk stands at about $26 to $28 million per year as a salary, and obviously that is not enough for Brandon Ayuk in his estimation. And I don't know, it is an interesting topic just because it all depends on how people view him. I personally would have wanted to see another year of Brandon Ayuk and seeing him produce at that same level, because right now, 2 seasons out of the 4, I'm 50-50 on that. You know, half of the time you've been in the NFL, you've produced up until that level. And yeah, Deebo, George Kittle might hurt him because he might not be getting the targets as those guys would probably get. But at the same time, on that flip side, is he getting now less attention because more people are paying attention to Deebo and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey, that he gets more one-on-one opportunities? There's a lot of factors and a lot of reasons why you would think the 49ers have their doubts about him. My value for Brandon Ayuk, you know, I think someone will give him 30. Would I give him 30 if I was the 49ers? Probably not. Just because of the salary cap. They already extended Christian McCaffrey. It seems like Deebo Samuel, you know, they're not really going to trade him. And then you have Ricky Pearsall there already. You extended Juwan Jennings. That's another player you prioritized ahead of Brandon Ayuk. The signs aren't there to make me believe this is going to work out. And right now it seems like both parties are just staring at one another, waiting to see who blinks and who budges on something to happen. And he didn't show up to the mandatory minicamp, so now we're going to have a period of where nothing really happens. Brandon Ayuk will continue to train. The 49ers will continue to do their own thing until training camp starts, and then I don't expect Brandon Ayuk to be there either. The 49ers are probably going to have to answer a lot of questions once training camp starts, and that's really where we're going to see more of this develop. If he doesn't show up and the 49ers have to answer more and more questions about it, they're going to come to a point to realize that, you know, this isn't working. waiting a little bit longer could open up some more opportunities. Maybe another domino falls somewhere where a team now feels more inclined to trade for Brandon Ayuk. So that could be a positive. But for right now, it just seems like I said, both parties are waiting for the other one to react. No one's budging up until this point, and it just seems like they're drifting further and further away from each other. It is a shame, but at the same time, the 49ers are loaded anyway. I'm really a big fan of Ricky Pearsall, so I expect him to contribute right away. They have still Christian McCaffrey, Debo, and George Kittle to have definitely enough to win that division, and maybe you can make an argument to be challenged a little bit more in the playoffs in the NFC, but the 49ers are still in a great place, and big picture, if you can get something back for Brandon Ayuk in a trade, that probably seems to be the most realistic and best option for the 49ers at this point, if really they can't get anything done. You just have to swallow your pride and do it. You might not want to, but at the end of the day, somebody else out there will want to pay Brandon Ayuk that price. That is just the reality of the market, whether you think he's valued at that or not. The prices just keep going up. So that's where I stand on it. That's what I think the 49ers will eventually do with this deal. But for right now, we're going to put a pin on that, and we're going to go to our second break of the show. And when we return, more on this issue around the NFL officials, how the decline of performance in recent seasons has been something to take note of, and why that could be. I will provide those answers after the break in the next segment. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Thank you for joining me back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to jump right away into our third segment, the eternal rivalry, the eternal discussion between the players and the referees in any sport really, not just the NFL. You always have the typical players arguing with the referees, getting teed up or getting thrown a flag, getting shown a yellow card, whatever the case may be. It's a tale as old as time with this, but in the NFL, it has seemed, I think, in some people's mind, start to become a real issue of these decisions by these referees really becoming a factor in affecting the games. And I will get to the example you see now on your screen, but to sort of give you a background and a little bit of context between this, the Athletics' Kalen Kaller wrote an article about the officiating in the NFL over the last few years, and there was some reports from former officials and former vice presidents, officials in the refereeing department that chimed in this article. One of them, a former official, reported and said back on Friday in this article that 27 officials have 3 years or less, and about a third of the officials nowadays have about 5 years or less of experience in the NFL and refereeing these games. Most officials agree that it takes about 5 years to become proficient at the NFL level, and 27 referees currently have 3 years or less, and about a third of the officials, of the 120 officials in the NFL, have 5 years or less. So that was what Kaller reported back on Friday in her article, and already that stat is pretty eye-opening just because you'd expect some of these referees to know what they're doing or be at least confident in what the decision-making process is, what all the rules are, and with so many years of experience, you pretty much assume that they're making the right decision most of the time, but that assumption probably turns out to be wrong if there's really not a lot of referees with over 5 years of experience at this highest level, and it might not seem too important to some that, might not be too engaged in the NFL or too familiar with what is going on in some of these officiating decisions in the NFL. But at the end of the day, with this being the highest level and this being obviously the NFL level with so much riding on every single week out of the 17 games to really determine your playoff seedings, determine just the momentum of some games, big wins, big momentum swing games that could happen. And if you're potentially cheated out of something in your estimation, that could really rub you the wrong way. But at the same time, to continue on with this report from Kaller in her article, other former NFL officials also chimed in on the issue, and one of them said, "It used to be that every crew had at least 4 or 5 experienced officials," one former referee said, and another one chimed in and stated, "Now you can't find a crew that has 4 strong officials anyway as well." So the issues around the referees have all sort of been really starting to build up over the last few years, even coming from former officials as well. And Kaller continued to write on in her article that these issues aren't just found at the highest level, but really can trickle down all the way down to the high school level in some of these games, not just in football, but also around other sports as well. And Bill Topp also was quoted in this article. Bill Topp is the president of the National Association of Sports Officials, and he sort of explained that the reality is we are taking more assignment chances than we ever have. We're putting people on games that we believe aren't quite ready, but the numbers are forcing it. Really just going to the fact that there's just not enough resources and not enough numbers there to produce this high experienced officials or just a crew of very experienced officials for a game at a certain point. They're sort of spread thin. It seems to be the biggest point made out of this whole situation, and with it, trickling down to such a minor level in high school, going up through college and then up until the NFL probably as well. This is something that might not be of too much importance to some people out there who don't pay attention too much to the referee decisions, but that brings me to this example that you see on your screen. Week 13, the Kansas City Chiefs at the Green Bay Packers. Pass interference calls that could have been called, that probably should have been made, in my opinion, and probably in a lot of people's opinions who saw this game. The Packers ended up winning this game, and it ended up coming down to a Hail Mary. That's how close these decisions and some of these calls that the referees make can really have a major impact on this game, because you see there on your left, on my left side of the screen, you have Marquez Valdes-Scantling, running down the field, being covered by a Packers defensive back, and they're both looking up at the ball, and obviously you see the defensive back for the Packers getting there way too early and making contact with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, trying to play the ball through the receiver. Obviously, it seems like a pretty obvious pass interference call, but it wasn't called on the day, and the Kansas City Chiefs were pretty irate about it. They obviously got in the referee's face and complained about it afterwards as well. But even so, it did come down to a Hail Mary opportunity there towards the end. And again, you see another opportunity where the ref could have possibly blown a pass interference call. If you see there in the middle of that giant pile, you see Travis Kelce there, the number 87, sort of being held by Devondre Campbell, not really giving him an opportunity to jump up and try to contest the catch and try to catch it in the end zone. And again, that could have been called a pass interference, but that was a little bit more lenient just because, it is a Hail Mary. Everybody's in there trying to nudge and maneuver their way towards the ball. So I can see that one a little bit not being called, but the one on the left is pretty obvious to me. Pretty incredible that it wasn't called a pass interference call. And that's only one example, but if you keep going, just a few weeks after that, to week 17, this one's a bit more obvious. This one caused a lot of commotion and a lot of attention around sports media and just the NFL in general. If you remember week 17, Monday Night Football, the Detroit Lions played at the Dallas Cowboys, and it came down to the last play. The Lions scored a potential go-ahead touchdown, but they were 1 point away from tying the game with the extra point or going for 2 and winning the game with about 25 to 23 seconds left, I want to say, if my memory serves me right. And they drew up a pretty great play. They drew up a play action pass there to the running back. Jared Goff looks right, and to the left, trailing off to the side, is Taylor Decker, who catches the ball in the end zone, and everybody thinks the two-point conversion worked miraculously. The courage from the Detroit Lions to do something at this moment, but then it was blown dead and ruled off because the official claimed that he never registered himself as eligible, him being Taylor Decker. And if you see the images, obviously I can't play them on here, the videos, but if you go back and look at it on social media, you could see that the offensive linemen, a few of them actually go up to the official, and you could assume they said that they're reporting as eligible, but it all became really confusing. How could the ref not think that they're registering themselves as eligible? What else could they have been saying going up to the official like that? But he claimed that they didn't, and it was blown dead, and they tried it a couple more times. There was a bunch of penalties and stuff like that until obviously the Detroit Lions didn't get it in the end, and they ended up losing that game in Week 17. And obviously they go on to have a great playoff run, but that really was a major point of, messing up for the referee because, what else in that situation could they have been saying to the official to not register as eligible? And then other examples that I couldn't find the evidence of, but a few years ago, if you remember, the Rams and Saints had a game, and one defensive back completely ran over a wide receiver in that game, not called it pass interference. The Rams defensive back blindsided and clearly took out the Saints wide receiver, not called a pass interference, and Sean Payton was pretty irate about it during the game and afterwards. And that's just a few examples of where this is sort of heading towards with the officials in the NFL. And is this a major question, or is this a major issue right now? For right now, I would say I would classify it as manageable, but it could obviously get worse if the NFL doesn't find the numbers to sort of get more people in here, more experienced referees to referee these games, obviously, and have more experienced crews out there to provide the best service for these games. You could look at it as a moment where it is in transition. You obviously have referees that don't have too much experience, but you wait it out a couple years and they could gain that experience and you could gain the numbers that way. Or you could look at it as a declining number, and you could think that it isn't going to get much better. It could actually get a little bit worse if you already have low numbers. What makes you think that it's going to grow? Those are two different points of view that you can have on the situation. I'd like to side with the more positive side and anticipate this number growing over the next few years, but it really just comes down to the obvious reason that in sports, if you have any idea related to sports or what is entailed with being a referee, you know that you're constantly going to get critiqued, chastised, whatever you want to say, in a game where you make a call that one team hates, one team loves, and then you're just going to get talked about it for the longest of times, and it's starting to become more of a reputation that some referees, build for themselves. And really, talking honestly here, it doesn't seem like a job that many people would want, so you could obviously understand the declining numbers, but in terms of financial issues and situations, this, for the NFL, being a referee for the NFL, it is almost like a part-time sort of job and role that these people have to take up because the NFL doesn't really compensate the referees for too much, and it is something that obviously is an issue and something that the referees would want to get and be full-time workers, employees for the NFL to sort of just deal with all of this criticism that they get from people and around the league. But because it's considered a part-time job and it isn't really valued as much by former officials and current officials around the NFL as well, you can see why the numbers are starting to decline. In the NFL, if they really want to do something about it, they might have to just cough up some extra money and pay the referees to really provide the best service, because if you're not getting paid enough as you would think you are valued by doing such a job that not a lot of people want to do, you're not getting paid enough, you're getting critiqued all the time, and you're just getting told over and over that, you stink at your job, you're not going to do the best at it, and also you could just drop it and think that this isn't worth it and just leave, which seems to be the main reason behind all of this, and it isn't in a good spot right now. A bad relationship starting to build up between the refs and the NFL, and it is, again, something the NFL could address with going to the head of the officials and working out something to maybe compensate them a little bit better for the job that they do. But it doesn't seem to be the case right now. You don't have any inclination that the NFL is heading towards that way. So this could maybe get a little bit worse over the next few years if the numbers don't start to grow. But hopefully there could be a resolution for this, because you just simply can't have these issues popping up around some of these games. You look at this in Week 17, you're right before the playoffs, and this didn't affect these two teams that much, but it could have very well determined a playoff seeding or something like that. It made you the 1 seed or win you the division or made you a wild card team. Things like that truly matter, and you can't have them be affected by refereeing decisions that aren't taken as to the level of seriousness that they should. And it is a growing problem. I think more people will start to understand that and see that, especially going into 2024 and afterwards as well. So we'll see how that all develops. Just really an eye-catching article that I saw recently in preparing for this show. But that's where we'll leave this topic, and we will move on with the rest of the show. Another quick break, and after that we will get into the AFC East running back rankings to continue the series on this show. And also going forward after that, some of the kickoff changes starting to create some new trends around returners and defenses around the NFL. Mike McDaniel talked about it. Justin Tucker mentioned it. Stick around to find out what they said, and we'll be right back after this break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. To access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Moving right along with this show and into the fourth topic, the AFC East running back rankings, to continue on with the series. Last time I talked about the NFC North, and now we can shift over to the AFC and looking at the New York Jets, the Dolphins, the Bills, and the Patriots, and where they all rank this week on my rankings. Starting off with number 4, I have the New England Patriots. Really the main two guys, Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson, coming over from the Washington Commanders. They had Ezekiel Elliott in their backfield last year, but he obviously re-signed with the Dallas Cowboys. So now you look to Ramondre Stevenson to be that bell cow for the Patriots. He missed 5 games last year, and in those 5 games missed, playing those 12 games, he recorded 619 yards, 4 touchdowns. Not the best in the passing game as well, only 38 receptions for under 240 yards. So, obviously the missed time doesn't help the statistics, and he has had better seasons than he has had in 2023 before. In his 3 seasons for Ramondre, 2 years he has played 12 games, and the year that he did play all 17 games, he recorded that 1,000-yard season. So you'd want to get him as healthy as possible to be a more experienced and reliable weapon that you can use, especially when the offense is so young. And you have so many high-powered offenses in that division that if you can control the game with the running game, it would definitely help out not only the offense but your young quarterback potentially if Drake May starts at some point in this season. But then you look to the right and you have Antonio Gibson, expected to play a decent role in the offense, or at least in the backfield this coming 2024. He was signed in free agency this offseason, but not much better than that number 2 option for the Patriots. A bit more finesse and a bit more involved in the passing game than Ramondre Stevenson would be, but the talent level, I guess you could say, really isn't there just compared to the other players in this division. I will get to them in just a second, but when you compare them at the end of the conversation, you would probably side with a few more other options. Not a bad number 1 option in Ramondre Stevenson, but I don't think the makeup of the team really helps it. The versatility also in the passing game is a little bit lacking, so you would hope to see a jump in that come 2024. But for right now, the New England Patriots fill up that last spot in the running back rankings for the AFC East. And then you move on to the number 3 team, and this is where you have the New York Jets. Breece Hall, big fan of Breece Hall. I like the development that I've seen. In the first year where he tore his ACL, he was on track to record a very impressive first year. Obviously, that gets canceled out because he got injured. Then in the second year, Aaron Rodgers obviously goes out, and you can't really see the full potential of what he could be. I know he put up some pretty decent numbers. He had 223 carries, almost 1,000 yards, 76 receptions, and 591 receiving yards. And it is difficult to have production with only one running back at the end of the day. Last year, Michael Carter was there. You had some guys rotate in and out, but nobody really to complement what Breece Hall was doing for this offense, putting up very impressive numbers, but the offense, the team overall, the morale was down, and it wasn't really helping the team out too much, even though I believe he could be in a real conversation for the best and maybe most talented running back in this division. But where the New York Jets sort of falter for me in the rankings overall for running back groups is they just don't have a pretty reliable second option. They're probably second best option up until this point is the rookie that they drafted out of Wisconsin, Braylon Allen. Again, running back coming in, very young at this point, and you don't really know what to expect out of him. You know what Breece Hall is going to do. You know he could produce for you at a very high level like he did last year with no Aaron Rodgers. Now you get your quarterback in there. It's definitely going to be a massive help, but to sort of have somebody in there to give Breece Hall a little bit of a break and still produce in the passing game, I think it's asking a little bit too much out of Braylon Allen in his first year. And also the offensive line, up until right now through minicamp and OTAs, they haven't had too many reps together. That's a massive thing for me, to have this line be a cohesive unit. If you have pieces coming in and out, that's not really going to work. So the New York Jets have the talent in one running back, but the numbers, the depth there, and the versatility from the overall group is what sort of holds me back from putting them any higher on this list. But again, massive fan of Breece Hall. They have a good one in him. They just need a little bit more to help him out. And then you go to number 2, and this is where it gets a little bit different for this list and what provides the running game for the Buffalo Bills, sliding in there in the number 2 overall spot. The number 1 running back is that man to your left, James Cook, the typical running back for them. Good development over his first couple of years there. 237 carries, over 1,000 yards as well. And in his first year and in his second year, a big improvement. The first 1,000-yard season recorded in 2023. In his 2 years, you saw that massive improvement. The first year was a little bit dicey, not too much production coming out of that spot. They had the passing game going for them, but they needed that to complement them. And then in 2023, it sort of flipped, and he was very productive, but not too much coming from the other receivers other than Stephon Diggs and maybe a couple of the tight ends. And now you head into this year, and it is a little bit different because you have a pretty decent running game in terms of numbers and in terms of where they rank and stack up in the NFL. And you look at some of the other options you have in Josh Allen. Why is he included in there? Well, he was their second leading rusher last season, probably again projecting towards 2024. Not a bad thing, in my opinion, if you have a quarterback be your second leading rusher. And in saying that, I truly mean that the way Josh Allen is, his style of play, you can't have all quarterbacks do it, but the way Josh Allen produces from the physical aspect and from the running game, I think it's all right to have him be more involved in the running game. I think you'd be doing a disservice to not take advantage of that. So Josh Allen being in there, doing a lot of creative things with your quarterback being able to run is certainly a weapon that they would love to use. And they also drafted Ray Davis to add a little bit more depth and power to James Cook's finesse and agility that they have in their number 1 running back. I would like to see a little bit more in the passing game. Only 44 receptions for 445 yards. 7th in total yards and yards per game. So there is a little bit ways to go with this team, but they add a little bit something different that I think really propels them above the New England Patriots and also the New York Jets. But obviously that leaves one team at the number 1 spot. The Miami Dolphins are the best running back group in the AFC East, just because, that speed, man, that speed absolutely kills and destroys opposing defenses. If you have one guy, you could sort of game plan for, you could expect what is going to happen in that play. You can anticipate it a little bit, but then once Raheem Mostert goes out, you could think you're going to have a break or could spot yourself a little bit there with a few plays to go until he comes back, but it isn't the case this time with De'Von Achane there repping Raheem Mostert and coming in as his backup. And as a team, they were 6th in the NFL in total rushing yards, over 2,300 rushing yards for them, and also 6th in the NFL in yards per game, 135.8 rushing yards per game as well. Mostert had the best year of his career as a 32-year-old, a 1,000-yard season, led the NFL in total touchdowns with 21. And then you have De'Von Achane as a rookie putting up 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns, and that's only his first year. He's going to learn a lot more, and it's going to look a lot differently. The game's going to slow down so much for Achane in his second year that it's really going to help him and propel him to potentially have a 1,000-yard season. And if you have 2 runners on your team to produce that quality and that level of production, you can only assume that the Dolphins are going to be a lot more balanced. They add a lot to this team as a whole, both of them coming out of the backfield, being involved in the passing game as well. Could be, again, something that I would like to see a little bit more of, but they just have the raw, natural ability of being blazing fast and just running past a lot of people. You can't teach that. It's hard to game plan around that if you have 2 guys doing it. So the Dolphins, based on that and the production, high level of efficiency you see from them, is why I have them as my number 1 ranked team. Number 1 ranked running back group in the AFC East. Let me know what you guys think of my list. Let me think of the order, and let me think if you like. Let me know if you like Josh Allen being a prominent figure in the Bills' running game. Some people love it, and I found it to be just a change of pace. I don't hate it, and just leave your thoughts in the live chat box or in the comments section afterwards, as always. But we will go to the last break of the show, and when we return, we're going to dive into the changes and the new trends we could be seeing around the kickoff rules changing as well, what Mike McDaniels had to say about it, and what Justin Tucker is doing this offseason to contribute more to special teams on the defensive side of the ball. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the last segment. Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Thank you for joining me for this last segment of the show where we're going to discuss more changes we could see in the kickoff rules after the format was changed, obviously heading into 2024. Last week we talked about the Kansas City Chiefs special teams coordinator bringing up the idea, the challenge really of defending these kickoffs now, with their kickers being more involved in defending these kicks, probably more responsible for making some tackles with all the blocking and the coverage team not being able to move, obviously, until the ball lands in the landing zone or is fielded by one of the returners. So a little bit more of an advantage there for the receiving team, and the kickers are just going to have to be more involved in it, and that could pose some difficulties, obviously, around injury, not the proper tackling technique, because obviously the kickers, I wouldn't say they're the most athletic out there. So how does that affect certain kickers, specifically focusing in on Justin Tucker here, who commented on this issue, and last year had 79% of his kickoffs going out for touchbacks, so that could still be the case again, but the NFL also moved the touchback up a little bit more if it goes back through the end zone. So maybe not too much of an incentive to kick it out through the back if you're going to give up those extra 5 yards. So Justin Tucker, with that being the case, was asked about, the situation, the scenario of maybe being more involved in tackling and going out there to defend a kickoff, to which he said, it's one of those things that just come naturally. If you're a ball player, you stick your nose in there. I don't think it's something that is necessarily encouraged, but it's not discouraged either. It just comes with the territory. It's a football play. And he was pretty enthusiastic about it. It seemed like he didn't have any problem with it, being out there to defend kickoffs. And he also really emphasized the point of making special teams exciting again, really keeping it relevant in the, obviously, sport of football, and really making a name for yourself on special teams now if you can be a great returner, great defending it, great blocker as well out there. And if you can kick it and maybe you're a defensive player, you could find your way into being more of a prominent role that way. I like it. I like that there's more strategy around it, and it seems like Justin Tucker's being a good sport about it. And I think he said he added like 5 or 6 pounds of muscle or something like that to get ready for potentially being out there. Not everybody has a Justin Reed on their team to go out there and kick the kickoffs off to the opposing team and be a safety and just go out there and defend it pretty naturally. So some kickers are going to have to adjust. Teams are very much going to strategize around this, and I love it for that simple reason. But on the flip side, on the offensive side of it now, Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel also had some comments about this on the offensive side about it, and because it is so, I would say it's fair to say that it is so inclined to see more action, more offensive action, more scoring, more big plays on that side of the ball. He believes that the coverage teams, because they can't move until the returner fields the ball and kicks the ball, it could be a big factor in terms of yards, which forecast points in Mike McDaniel's terms, in his own words. And he goes on to say that it does create a little bit more flexibility and opportunity to sort of open up the roster for some players to make their names for themselves, like I previously mentioned. But in terms of some of the more established, prominent players, star players that you might not typically see out there on kickoffs, Mike McDaniel said, I think it gives you more flexibility to get some starters out there on the unit for various reasons. Overall, it wouldn't shock me if every number one receiver and every number one running back in the league is raising their hands to return kicks in week 4. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So far, it's been pretty negative from the special teams coordinators and really anybody talking about the kickoffs on how it's going to be a challenge. Some players aren't used to it. We don't know what's going to happen with this in 2024. I like that Mike McDaniel sort of brought up a pretty interesting point about it because, the new rule was sort of put in place to see more action, obviously, more offense in a way that the defense will struggle more, I believe. But the adjustments, I think, is a good thing. And seeing maybe, I don't know if we're going to see Tyreek Hill out there for the Miami Dolphins, or if we're going to see Isaiah Pacheco out there for the Chiefs. You see some teams really strategizing around this. The Steelers just pop up right away just because I've been following them. Signing Cordell Patterson, great returner, maybe not so relevant on the offensive side of the ball where that was his role also with the Atlanta Falcons. But now because teams are starting to realize that this is going to be a major point of emphasis, a major swing point potentially in the game of football, the returners are really reemerging as prominent figures in the in one aspect of football, which I think is great. More adjustments with kickers and non-kickers would be where I would side if you pose the question of, you talk about defense, defending these new kickoffs and sort of benefiting from it if you're on the offensive side. Will the defense or the offense find it harder to find success in this new format of kickoffs where I would believe that the defense would definitely struggle more and that the offense will find it a little bit easier to have success with this just because the nature of it all, the coverage team can't move until the returner fields it. And then at that point, you feel that you finally look up and you could sort of see everything developing. Whereas before, obviously, they moved when the ball was kicked and you didn't really get a big feel or really decent vantage point seeing it. You feel that and you already have about 10 people running at you, already managing, calculating their angles in a certain way, and it didn't really provide too much excitement. Now, with the returners getting a clear picture of how their blockers develop and everything like that, I think it's formatted in a way where the offense is supposed to benefit from this, but you never know. The defense just has more factors around defending this, obviously, whether you use a typical kicker or you put a safety out there like Justin Reed. It is difficult also more to maneuver your way around a block, if that makes sense. Trying to explain it as, the fielder fields the kick, obviously the returner gets it in his hands, and then as a coverage team player, you have to now, figure out a way to get around all these blocks that are already set up. They have a game plan, obviously, as to how they're going to run it through the returners, and at that point, if you don't get your angles right, you're going to have about 2 to 3 guys already blocking you, and it is from a certain point that it doesn't make it too much easier for the return team, or the coverage team, to find a way to try and get this to make it for them, to make it a little bit easier to defend the kicks. That's where I stand on it. The defenders will have to, adjust a little bit more to it, but at the same time, the offense, there is some more benefits of it, obviously, with it. You don't have to worry about too many penalties now that you're establishing your blocks, and sort of things like that is why I believe the offense will benefit from this a little bit more. But overall, I think it's a great thing to have on there. Great new addition to the team that just adds a different aspect of football that we just haven't seen really or be too relevant in the years past. But let me know what you guys think about it. Are you for or against the new kickoff rules? Do you like it? Do you think it's bad? I'm really looking forward to it in 2024. It's going to be a massive point of emphasis. I'm guaranteeing it. People are going to benefit from it greatly, not just teams, but also players that can make a name for themselves as well in the NFL on special teams now. I think it's going to be great for those players to get a better opportunity. But in saying that, that will do it for this episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. I want to give you guys a huge thank you for tuning into this show. And also, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the episode as well. Make sure to check out the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast on the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube for a lot more content around the NFL and a lot other different stories to tune into as well that I cover. Make sure to also follow the network on other social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok to check out the network's content other than sports as well. If you want to see more of me, like I mentioned, check out the 2 YouTube channels as well. And also, as a reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL conversations and football discussions with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you for joining me on today's episode, and I hope to see you guys back here again with me tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that